Well, let's head to Libya now, where the Tripoli-based and UN-backed government has allowed Italy to deploy warships in Libyan waters to support the war against human trafficking. Prime Minister Fayez al-Seraj had initially denied access to the European Union's anti-trafficking sea mission into Libyan waters. Al-Seraj's change of heart comes in the wake of a conditional ceasefire with the Eastern military commander Khalifa Haftar in Paris on Wednesday. People smugglers have been operating almost freely on the Libyan waters, sending thousands of migrants to Italy since 2014. Well, a rather significant development indeed there coming from Libya. Let's bring you more on this now. I'm joined from Brussels by CGTN's Kevin Osbeck. Kevin, just talk us through the significance and the potential impact of this decision by Libya to allow foreign warships access to its waters.
Well, the hope is this will help slow down the number of asylum seekers leaving the Libyan coast who have their hearts set on reaching Italy and other parts of Europe. Here in Brussels, many politicians as well as many leaders from NGOs say really one thing that would help stop the flow of people leaving Africa to Europe would be to close down or at least stop as much as possible the human trafficking network that's operating in Libya. So far this year, nearly 100,000 migrants have tried to reach the Italian coast. That's up 17% from last year. But really the concern of many here in Europe, especially from the NGOs, is that it's such a dangerous journey to cross the Mediterranean. Last year alone, nearly 4,000 asylum seekers drowned crossing the Mediterranean. They say that these boats that the human traffickers use are quite shoddy. They're not capable, many of them, of making it across the Mediterranean. So that's why it's so often we hear reports of these human trafficking boats capsizing. So the effort is underway to try to stop the flow of people and try to prevent people from making a journey that is often fatal.
And indeed, Kevin, another development when it comes to the migrant crisis is that the EU's top court now has ruled that a law requiring refugees to seek asylum in the first country they reach will apply even in exceptional circumstances. What effect is this likely to have then on the migrant crisis?
That's right, and the rule you were talking about is known as the Dublin Regulation. And that Dublin Regulation states that when an asylum seeker enters the European Union, it is the country that they first enter, it's that country's duty to process their asylum request. Now, if you remember, between 2015 and 2016, during the height of the refugee crisis, while that migration route through the Western Balkans was still open, many migrants, thousands of them, went through Turkey into the Balkans with the goal of trying to make it to Germany or somewhere else in Western Europe. Both Austria and Slovenia took issue with a number of cases. They turned down a number of asylum cases, and they took this to the court because they said they have the right to send these asylum seekers back to where they entered into the EU. In these particular court cases, the country of entry was Croatia. The European Court of Justice has ruled that even though at one point Germany had this open doors policy, the Dublin regulation law still was intact, and it's not Austria and Slovenia's duty to process these asylum claims. They have every right to send them back to Croatia or where else these asylum seekers who've had their cases turned down entered the EU. So attorneys say there's potentially hundreds of asylum seekers who've had their cases turned down in Austria and Slovenia who may now have to head back to Croatia and have their cases heard there.
That is an interesting development indeed. Thanks very much to Kevin Osbeck joining us live there from Brussels.